Hello everyone, welcome back. So let's take a look at what we have here. We had, in a previous tutorial, we created essentially these two scripts. We have our enemy script here, which we're running everything inside of Ready, where we're generating these two random variables, or the values stored in these random variables that are based on the random function range here. And then we're applying that to a enemy vector, so our x and y, and then we're applying that impulse here, and that's what's allowing our essentially our enemy guys to walk around randomly or in different directions. If we look at our player script here, we have a separate function here that we just were playing with before to just kind of learn a little bit more about creating custom functions in the last tutorial or the last few tutorials, and that's just taking in two integers and multiplying it and then printing that to the screen. All right, so what we're going to do in this video is create the player movement. Now, the first thing we want to do with all of this stuff is we want to think about whenever you're creating a game, and when you take the game design course later, we get a lot deeper into game loops. But we want to think about, well, what is the primary game loop or the mechanic? And what a game loop essentially is it's the loop that's constantly running and checking different parts of the game to make sure that it's keeping up with what it's supposed to do, right? So we're getting input, we're constantly checking input, and then through that updating the input, we want to check whatever the game state is. So where is our character moving? So if we're using Mario Brothers for an example, or a police game, where is the current state of our player, right? Moving based on that input. So once we get the input and then we check the current state, we actually apply whatever we're doing. So that's when we actually make the character move, jump, rotate, or what have you. So as we're learning, a good place to learn to set up our game loop is inside of a function called the process function. Now, if you've used Unity before, this would be our update function. Or, now this function ready, just to reiterate, this is similar. This is called just once. Process is called every frame. With function ready, you can think of this as your awake or your start function, where the second that the level, or in this particular script, it's our player, appears on the scene, it's going to call whatever is in function ready first. So for now, let's go ahead and delete this function calculator here, and let's use the function process that I talked about earlier. And we could use this first one using autocomplete here, and that'll create our signature. Now inside of here, you can see that it's using essentially a single parameter here, and that's called delta. Remember, this is our data type, and this is our variable name. And then we're not going to be returning anything, so that's why it says void here. Now we're getting an error down here. It says expected indented block after function. Whenever you're not using something and you're storing it for a moment, you could use pass and save that. And we also need to get rid of this line here because we are no longer using calculator. So if we didn't have this, put a comment here and I save this, we would get an error. So we want to make sure that we use our pass statement here. So let's go ahead and see, just to show you what it sort of does, is let's go ahead and write print. And then inside of here, we're going to print, let's see, we'll write hello from process. All right, let's save this. Now if I run the game, we'll close our window here. You look at the bottom here, it says hello from process over and over again. And it's running 1000, 2000. So it's running every frame. I have a pretty powerful computer here, so I probably am hitting at least 60 frames a second, and Godot is super performant, so that helps too. All right, so let's take a look at how we can make our player move. So there's a function that is built in called apply force. It's this guy right here. And it takes in two parameters. So if you hold control and you left click on it, it'll bring up the documentation and you can see apply force. Applies a position force to the body, and there's two parameters. There's the force itself, and then there's the position. It says vector 2 x and y, right? So let's go ahead and write this out. So back in our player script, here's our script here. Let's go back to our player script. I keep forgetting that you're switching here, not our scenes. And I can just say, okay, I'm going to make a vector 2. And on the x-axis here, we could apply 10. And remember, this is going to do it over and over again. And this might not be enough for us, comma, and then just 0.0 here. And then I'm going to save that. And oh, I got rid. You can get rid of the F. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm so used to C sharp at this point. So now when I press play, you can see that our player is slowly moving at 10, right? So just to kind of really show this, let's go to our level 2D world and let's find our cop. I'm going to press W, just move him to the center of our scene, and then just press play. You can see our character's moving, is sliding 10, and you can see that it picks up over time. And then the reason for that is because we're using physics here. We're applying a little bit of force every frame at 10, and it's slowly making our character slide. We're not necessarily just pushing or moving on the x-axis. We're forcing or pushing on the x-axis, applying force. All right, and so let's actually do something like this, where let me make it minus 10, and save. We'll make it minus 50, because I want it to hit that enemy. I'm going to press play. You can see we bump into that enemy. So we're kind of getting an idea on how this works. Another thing you can do is, because you're using physics, you generally want to use physics force. So I'm going to hit enter here, and let me close this out. And I'm just going to type func, and then underscore physics. Oh, I'm sure it's process physics. No, it is physics process, I believe. Here, let me check again. Let's see, physics. And the reason why that's not working too, and I'm just leaving these little errors in because there we go, physics process. And you could see, let me scooch this over, kind of expand my screen a little bit here. What this is, and I'm going to copy this. So I'm holding Alt and pushing a down arrow, and now we get an arrow up here. And if you want to take a second and be like, wait, why is it giving me an error? It's because we have to add a process here. And that'll, or sorry, a pass here. So let's save that. And now what will happen is this will always stay at 60 frames per second, and this is what you generally want to use as this function for anything that's to do with physics. I want you to notice that our character moved to the left when I added a negative value here. Now this is important because if I want my character to move to the right, I would make it a positive value. Why am I saying this? Well, because what I want to do right now is using an if statement, I'd like to script using my WASD keys, my cop walking around. So the way we do that is we need to add some input. So let's go to our project and our project settings here and go to the input tab. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a new action here. And we're going to name this one walk underscore right. And then we'll add that. And then what I want to do is you'll see there's this little plus sign here and it's an add an event. I'm going to click that and I'm going to listen for input. So I'm going to press my D key and you could see physical or D Unicode. And what that's doing is that's picking up the D key on my keyboard, and you can see it shows a little key here. And then just do walk underscore, and I'm just going to copy this because I'm going to be using that opening. And then we'll do left. You probably guessed it. I'm going to add the A key for left. Up. W. Down. I'll add the S key for that, pressing S and hit OK. All right, so now that our input's set up, I can hit close here. And what I can do inside of here is I can have it instead of this, using this, essentially this, I'll just move this apply force here. But what I can do is here is I'll use a pre-made function that deals with input. So we can type out input here, dot, and then there's all of these things, add join mapping, add action release, action press. And what I want is not action press, it's is action pressed, because we want to check if we pushed, there we go, is action pressed, this one right here. You can see there's a set inside of there of quotes, and then it's asking for a string name. And the string that we're going to do is if we go to our input settings here, we're checking is walk right pressed, and that's the D key, and so on. So what we can do inside of here is put set of quotes, type walk, and then you can see it gives us our different parameters. And remember, walk right is mapped to D. So if I press that, now we have our input action here. And I can take this and just holding Alt, I can move it underneath here and I can tab it in. And what it'll do is it'll apply 50, you can see, to the x-axis here. Expected inside. So one of the things is you can right click and then hit enter after this. And it looks like, oh, I want to write the word if input. Sorry. So what it's going to do here is it's checking if we pushed our walk right key, and that's what this if keyword stands for. And then we want to make sure we put a colon here. Let's back up and hit enter. There we go. Now it's tabbed in. So what an if statement essentially does is it checks if something is happening, right? So if our input is pressed, which is our walk right, which is our D key, we're going to apply force, which is 50 here. So let's hit Control S to save this. And remember, this is being called every it's called every frame, but within 60 frames. So if I press play here, you can say I have my cop, and if I'm pressing my D key, all right, cool. So let's go ahead and stop this. And then I'm going to just duplicate this line here. And I want to back this up a little bit here. And if we're walking left, I want it to be minus 50. And then let's copy both of these. Hit backspace, paste those out. I'll just start typing walk so it auto-completes. We want walk up. And we want this one to be down. I'll just type this out. And for this, we're going to make this 0, 0.0, and then we will have it do 50 here. And then copy this minus 50 here. Because this represents our y-axis, which is our up and down. Let's save this, and now when I press play, oh, you know what? I need to actually flip those. I'm surprised I didn't catch it. So walking up should be negative because we're going negative when we go upwards, and then positive when we go down here, based on the position of our player. So let's press play here. Now you can see I'm moving around. Now this is pretty slow. So what I'd like to do is essentially make that a little bit easier. So instead of having to type 50 or go back and edit each one of these values, let's go ahead and just make a variable. So inside of our physics process here, we'll just make a local variable called move speed. And we'll make this equal to, I don't know, 300. Well, I don't know, it moves okay at 50. So we'll try 200 here. And now I can just copy this and then just paste it here. And then make sure to leave the negative in here. And let me zoom out a little bit so you can see that complete code. I'm just holding the control key and scrolling my wheel. Let's save that. And then what we can do here is, let's press play. And he's moving a lot faster, and you can see now I'm moving my character around. Now, because it's not moving like a true, it's applying force, you can see my character slides, kind of like the character is on ice. But that's just essentially, we'll get into much better movement systems in other games, but for now you can see that's kind of how we're applying force. All right, so let's walk around a little bit here. Let's bump into this guy. You can see we both sort of rotate. And I don't want either of us to rotate. So what I can do here is you can see that this is corresponding to my player here, right? So if I click on enemy here, so let's go to our player for a second. You can see we have a player rich body here. And let's go to our 2D scene. This is our player. And if I click on enemy, this is our enemy. And you can see it switches here. What I want to do on both of those is go to deactivate. I want to lock the rotation on both my enemy. I'm going to hit Control S to save that, my player. And what will happen now is when I bump into him, I don't want either the cop or the enemies, the robber, to rotate. So I just want to be able to bump them around. And I might just, again, I think for this level, because like I said, I want to bump them into the paddy wagon. And we'll have a character, the camera, follow them around so we could chase them around the level. So we'll do that too. But I think this is it for this level. Let me just reiterate one last thing. like because this isn't a true programming class. It's just to kind of get you comfortable with using Godot and all that stuff. We have programming classes for that, but I want you to think about this for a second. We have this function processing every frame, so it's running this function every frame. And what an if statement does is an if statement checks if something is happening. So here we're checking if the walk right button is pressed, which we set up as an input map, and then here we're applying the force, and we're doing that over and over and over again. So again, I don't expect you to fully grasp programming or to be a computer programmer after these last few lessons, but I'm hoping you're getting a little more comfortable with Godot before we get into vibe coding. Anyway, I think that's good for this tutorial.